The woman's silhouette shimmered against the white expanse like a mirage. But Harrison Zimmer knew better than to trust his eyes in this God-forsaken landscape, where the Texas sun turned the Chihuahuan desert's salt flats into a cruel mirror of heaven. He reined his chestnut mare to a halt, squinting through the heat waves that danced across the horizon. And there she was again, a dark speck moving with the deliberate slowness of someone who had long since abandoned hope of reaching anywhere in particular. It was October of 1879, and Harrison had been riding the circuit between Brownsville and the scattered ranches that dotted the border country for 3 years now, carrying mail and occasional supplies to folks too stubborn or too desperate to abandon their claims in this unforgiving territory. He had seen plenty of strange things in his 24 years, but never a lone figure walking across the salt flats where even the hardiest desert creatures knew better than to venture during the midday hours. He urged his horse forward, the animal's hooves crunching against the crystalline surface that stretched for miles in every direction. As he drew closer, the details began to resolve themselves from the heat-distorted air. A woman, her dark hair hanging in tangled waves past her shoulders, her dress torn and stained with dust and salt. She walked with one hand pressed against her lower back, the other shielding her eyes from the merciless glare. Then he saw what made his breath catch in his throat. She was heavily pregnant, her belly swollen beneath the ruined fabric of what had once been a traveling dress of deep blue cotton. 9 months gone if he was any judge, maybe more, and out here alone where the nearest water was at least 6 miles in any direction. Harrison kicked his mare into a faster trot, closing the distance between them. The woman must have heard the approach because she stopped and turned, swaying slightly on her feet. Her face was sunburned and drawn with exhaustion, her lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. But her eyes, when they met his, were a startling clear gray that reminded him of rain clouds, and they held a fierce determination that spoke of a will not yet broken. "Madam," he called out, pulling his horse to a stop a respectful distance away and dismounting in one fluid motion. "You are in need of help." She opened her mouth to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. Harrison quickly unslung his canteen and crossed to her, holding it to her lips. "Slow now," he cautioned. "Just small sips or you will make yourself sick." She drank greedily at first, then forced herself to slow, her throat working as she swallowed. When she finally pulled back, some color had returned to her face. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hoarse but steady. "I thought I was going to die out here." "You nearly did," Harrison said bluntly, his eyes taking in the swollen state of her ankles visible beneath her torn hem, the way she stood with all her weight on one leg. "What in God's name are you doing walking across the flats? Where did you come from?" The woman's hand went protectively to her belly, and something flickered across her face, fear or shame or perhaps both. "The wagon train," she said. "We were heading to California. There was an argument and they left me." She said it simply, without inflection, but Harrison felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of anyone abandoning a pregnant woman in country like this. "When?" he asked. "3 days ago, I think. Maybe 4. I lost track after the first night." She swayed again, and Harrison caught her elbow to steady her. Up close, he could see the fine tremors running through her body, the signs of complete physical exhaustion. "I have been following the tracks, hoping to catch up, but the wind covered them." "The wind and the salt both," Harrison said grimly. "This whole flat is like a clean slate every few hours once the wind picks up. You were walking in circles, madam. Another day and you would have been too weak to continue." He studied her face, noting the delicate bone structure beneath the sunburn, the proud set of her jaw. "Can you ride?" "I have never been on a horse in my life," she admitted, but I will try anything to get out of this place." Harrison nodded and led her to his mare, who stood placidly despite the strange circumstances. "Her name is Copper," he said. "She has a gentle temperament. I am going to help you up, and then I will walk alongside. There is a way station about 5 miles west, old place, but it has a well and some shelter. Can you hold on that long?" "I can hold on as long as I need to," the woman said, and Harrison believed her. Getting her mounted proved to be a challenge given her condition, but between his help and her stubborn determination, they managed to get her seated in the saddle. Harrison adjusted the stirrups and showed her how to hold the reins, though he kept Copper's lead rope in his own hand. "What is your name, madam?" he asked as they began the slow walk westward. "Penelope Vance," she said. "I was Penelope Hartwell before I married, but my husband died 6 months ago. Cholera took him while we were still in Missouri, preparing for the journey west." "Harrison Zimmer," he replied, tipping his hat even though she was above him now. "I am sorry for your loss, Mrs. Vance." "I am not," Penelope said, and the bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "He was not a good man, Mr. Zimmer. I will not pretend to mourn him just because he is dead." She paused, then added more quietly, "Though I would not have wished him to die that way. Cholera is a terrible thing." Harrison did not know what to say to that, so he focused on the path ahead, guiding them toward the distant smudge of brown that marked the edge of the salt flats. The sun beat down mercilessly, and he rationed the water between them, making sure Penelope drank more than he did. She needed it more, carrying the extra weight of the child as she was. "Why did they leave you?" he asked finally, unable to contain his curiosity and anger. No decent wagon master would abandon a pregnant woman. Penelope was quiet for so long that Harrison thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant. "There was a man in the train, Jacob Moreland. He took an interest in me after my husband died. Said he would take care of me and the baby, make sure we got to California safely. I thought he was being kind." She laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "I was wrong. He wanted payment for his kindness, if you understand my meaning. When I refused him, he spread lies about me to the other families. Said I was a woman of loose morals, that the baby might not even be my husband's child, that I would bring shame and bad luck to the whole train." Harrison's jaw tightened, and the wagon master believed him. "The wagon master was his brother," Penelope said flatly. "So yes, he believed him, or pretended to. They held a vote and most of the families sided with the Morelands. I think some of them felt guilty about it because they left me with a canteen and some food, but it does not matter. They left me nonetheless." "That matters," Harrison said fiercely. "That matters a great deal, Mrs. Vance. What they did was attempted murder, plain and simple. If I knew which wagon train it was, I would ride after them and see them face justice." "They are long gone by now," Penelope said wearily. "And I do not want justice, Mr. Zimmer. I just want to survive. I want my baby to survive." Her hand moved in a slow circle over her belly, and Harrison saw the tightness around her eyes that spoke of pain. "Are you having contractions?" he asked, alarm sharpening his voice. "Some," she admitted. "They started yesterday, but they are not regular. Not yet." Harrison quickened his pace, urging Copper to move faster despite the heat. The way station could not come soon enough. He had helped birth a few calves and foals in his time, but a human baby was entirely different territory, and the thought of delivering a child out here in the desert with no proper supplies made his blood run cold. The sun had moved another hand's width across the sky by the time the way station came into view. A squat adobe building with a sagging roof and a windmill that creaked in the hot breeze. The well was still good, Harrison knew, though the station had been abandoned for regular use 2 years back when the main road shifted further north. He used it sometimes as a stopping point on his longer circuits, and he kept a few supplies cached inside for emergencies. He helped Penelope down from the horse, noting how she bit her lip against a cry when her feet hit the ground. Her legs nearly buckled, and he caught her around the waist, supporting most of her weight as he guided her toward the station's door. Inside, the air was marginally cooler, and Harrison settled her on the one intact cot that remained from the station's active days. "I am going to get water and see to copper," he told her. "Try to rest. We are safe here for now." Penelope nodded, her eyes already drifting closed. Harrison worked quickly, drawing water from the well and bringing it inside in the battered bucket that hung on a hook. He tended to his horse, making sure she had water and a small portion of grain from his saddlebags, then returned to check on Penelope. She was asleep, her breathing deep and even despite the occasional twitch that crossed her features. In repose, with the lines of exhaustion smoothed from her face, she looked younger than he had initially thought. Perhaps 22 or 23, not much younger than himself. Her dark hair spread across the thin pillow, and Harrison found himself studying the curve of her cheekbone, the way her lashes cast shadows on her sunburned skin. He shook himself and turned away, busying himself with taking inventory of the supplies he had cached here. There was some jerky, hardtack, a few cans of beans, and a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for emergencies. If Penelope went into labor, he supposed this qualified. There was also a clean shirt he could tear up for bandages, and an old but serviceable blanket that would be warmer than the thin covering on the cot. Night fell quickly in the desert, the temperature dropping from scorching to almost comfortable. Harrison built a small fire in the station's fireplace, using dried mesquite he found stacked in the corner, and set about heating some beans and water for coffee. The domestic activity felt strange after 3 days of hard riding, but also oddly comforting. Penelope woke when the smell of food reached her, pushing herself upright with visible effort. "I did not mean to sleep so long," she said, her voice still rough but stronger than before. "You needed it," Harrison assured her, ladling beans onto a tin plate and handing it to her along with a spoon. "Eat slowly. Your stomach needs time to adjust to food again after going without." She obeyed, taking small bites and chewing thoroughly. Harrison watched her from the corner of his eye as he ate his own portion, noting the way color was gradually returning to her face, how her hands had stopped their constant trembling. She was resilient, this woman. Most people would have given up long before she did. "What will you do now?" he asked when they had both finished eating. "Do you have family somewhere? Friends who might take you in?" Penelope shook her head. "My parents died when I was 16. My husband had a brother in California, but I have no way of knowing if he even made it there safely, and even if he did, I doubt he would welcome his brother's widow showing up on his doorstep, especially pregnant." She wrapped her arms around her belly protectively. "I have some skills. I can sew well, and I know how to keep accounts. I worked in my father's general store before I married. I thought I might find work in a town somewhere, save up enough to make a new start." "The nearest town of any size is Brownsville," Harrison said. "It is about 30 miles southeast of here, right on the Rio Grande. It is a rough place in some ways, lots of cowboys and vaqueros passing through, but there are good people there too. Mrs. Chen runs a boarding house that caters to respectable women. She might have room for you at least until the baby comes." Hope flickered across Penelope's features. "Could you take me there? I have a little money left, not much, but I could pay you something for your trouble." Harrison held up a hand. "I would not take your money, Mrs. Vance. I will take you to Brownsville because it is the right thing to do, and because no one deserves to be left to die in the desert. He paused, then added more gently, "But we cannot travel immediately. You need time to recover your strength, and to be frank, I do not think you have much time before that baby decides to make an appearance. How far along are you exactly?" Penelope's hand moved to her belly again in that protective gesture that was becoming familiar. "The baby should have come 2 weeks ago, according to my calculations, but first babies are often late, or so I have been told." Harrison felt his stomach drop. "You are overdue. Mrs. Vance, you could go into labor at any moment. We need to prepare for that possibility." "I know," Penelope said quietly. "I have been trying not to think about it. I have never done this before, and I do not have anyone to help me to tell me what to do." Her voice cracked slightly. "I am frightened, Mr. Zimmer. I will not lie about that." Something in Harrison's chest constricted at the admission. He moved to sit on the edge of the cot, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I will not lie to you either," he said. "I have never helped deliver a human baby. I am not a doctor or even a midwife. But I will do everything in my power to help you and your child survive this. You have my word on that." Penelope looked at him for a long moment, those gray eyes searching his face. "Why?" she asked. "You do not know me. I am nothing to you. Why would you make such a promise?" Harrison considered the question, thinking about the values his mother had instilled in him before consumption took her when he was 15. The code his father had lived by before a rattlesnake bite ended his life 2 years later. "Because every life has worth," he said finally. "Because kindness costs nothing and cruelty costs everything. Because you needed help and I was there to give it. Does there need to be a better reason than that?" Tears welled in Penelope's eyes and she brushed them away impatiently. "I am sorry. I am not usually so weepy. I think it is the baby, the exhaustion, everything." "You have nothing to apologize for," Harrison said firmly. "You have been through an ordeal that would break most people. You are entitled to tears." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote. Harrison banked the flames for the night and spread his bedroll on the floor a respectful distance from the cot. "Try to get more rest," he told Penelope. "We will see what tomorrow brings." But tomorrow brought what Harrison had feared. He woke before dawn to the sound of Penelope's sharp intake of breath and found her sitting up on the cot, her face pale in the dim light filtering through the single window. "The contractions," she said through gritted teeth. "They are coming regularly now, every 10 minutes or so." Harrison was on his feet immediately, his mind racing through everything he knew about birth from watching animals. Keep her calm, keep her comfortable, make sure he had clean water and clean cloth for when the baby came. "All right," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "First babies usually take a long time. We have hours yet. Let me build up the fire and get some water heating." The morning passed in a blur of activity punctuated by Penelope's increasing discomfort. Harrison found himself talking to her constantly, partly to distract her and partly to distract himself from his own nervousness. He told her about growing up on a small ranch outside of San Antonio, about losing his parents and striking out on his own, about the various characters he encountered on his mail routes. Penelope, for her part, told him about her childhood in a small Missouri town, about the father who had doted on her and taught her to love books and numbers, about the mother who had been gentle and kind before a fever took her. She told him about marrying Thomas Vance at 19 because he seemed stable and reliable, only to discover that he had a cruel streak that emerged when he drank, which was often. "He never hit me," she said during a break between contractions. "But there are other ways to hurt someone. Words can wound just as deeply as fists. He made me feel small, worthless. He said I was lucky he married me at all, that no other man would have wanted me." She paused, breathing through another contraction before continuing. "When he died, I felt guilty for being relieved." What kind of person feels relief when their husband dies? The kind of person who was trapped in a bad situation and finally found a way out, Harrison said. "You did not kill him, Mrs. Vance. You have no reason to feel guilty." "Penelope," she said suddenly. "Call me Penelope." "I think we are past formalities, do not you?" Harrison smiled despite the tension of the situation. "Penelope, then. And you should call me Harrison." By midday, the contractions were coming every 5 minutes, and Penelope could no longer talk through them. She gripped Harrison's hand with surprising strength, her nails digging into his palm as wave after wave of pain washed over her. Harrison had moved behind her, supporting her back as she had requested, and found himself murmuring encouragement in a voice that sounded calmer than he felt. "You are doing so well," he told her. "You are the strongest person I have ever met. Just keep breathing just like that." The afternoon stretched into evening, and still the baby did not come. Penelope's strength was flagging, her face drawn with exhaustion and pain. Harrison helped her take sips of water between contractions, wiped her face with a cool cloth, and wished desperately that he had more medical knowledge, that there was a doctor or midwife within reach. Then, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, something changed. Penelope let out a cry that was different from the others, more urgent, more primal. "I need to push," she gasped. "Harrison, I need to push." "Then push," Harrison said, moving to a position where he could help guide the baby into the world. His hands were shaking, but he forced them steady. "I am here. I have you." What followed was the most intense half-hour of Harrison's life. Penelope pushed with everything she had left, her cries echoing off the adobe walls, while Harrison did his best to help, to support, to encourage. And then, miraculously, impossibly, there was a baby, slippery and red and screaming with impressive volume. "It is a boy," Harrison said, his voice cracking with emotion as he wrapped the infant in the cleanest cloth he could find. "Penelope, you have a son." Penelope was crying and laughing at the same time, reaching for the baby with trembling hands. Harrison placed the infant on her chest, watching as she instinctively curled around him, protecting and cherishing all at once. The baby's cries quieted as he felt his mother's warmth, his tiny fist curling around a lock of her dark hair. Harrison dealt with the aftermath as best he could, making sure Penelope was as comfortable as possible, that the bleeding was normal, that both mother and baby seemed healthy despite the circumstances. When he was finally satisfied that immediate crisis had passed, he sank down onto his bedroll, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. "Harrison," Penelope said softly. He looked up to find her watching him, the baby asleep in her arms. "Thank you. I would not have survived this without you. My son would not be here without you." "I did not do much," Harrison said. "You did all the hard work." "You did everything," Penelope insisted. "You saved my life in the desert. You brought me here. You stayed with me through the birth, even though it must have been terrifying. You gave me hope when I had none left." She paused, looking down at her son. "I am going to name him Henry after my father, Henry Vance." "That is a good name," Harrison said. He hesitated, then asked, "What will you do now, you and Henry?" Penelope's expression grew thoughtful. "I still want to go to Brownsville if you are willing to take us. I still need to find work to build a life for my son. But I am not in such a desperate hurry anymore. If we could stay here a few more days, let me recover my strength before we travel, I would be grateful." "Of course," Harrison said immediately. "Stay as long as you need. I can send word to Brownsville, let them know I will be delayed on my route. It will not be a problem." They fell into an easy routine over the next few days. Harrison hunted jackrabbits and cooked them over the fire, made coffee that Penelope declared the worst she had ever tasted, but drank anyway, and hauled water from the well. Penelope rested and nursed baby Henry, who proved to have healthy lungs and an insatiable appetite. In the evenings, after the heat had broken and the desert air turned pleasant, they would sit outside and watch the stars emerge, talking about everything and nothing. Harrison found himself telling Penelope things he had never shared with anyone, about his dreams of someday owning a ranch again, about the loneliness of his current life, about the way he sometimes felt adrift in the world with no real anchor. Penelope listened without judgment, offering insights that surprised him with their wisdom. "You are not adrift," she told him one night as they sat watching the Milky Way sprawl across the sky. "You are just waiting for the right moment to drop anchor. There is a difference." "And you?" Harrison asked. "Are you waiting too?" Penelope was quiet, her hand gently patting Henry's back as he slept against her shoulder. "I think I have been drifting for a long time," she admitted. "Since my parents died, maybe longer. I thought marriage would give me purpose, a place to belong, but it just made me feel more lost. Now, with Henry, I have a purpose again. He needs me. That is enough for now." Harrison wanted to say that she deserved more than just being needed, that she deserved to be valued and cherished for who she was, but he held his tongue. They had only known each other for a few days. He had no right to such thoughts. But the thoughts came anyway, unbidden and increasingly frequent. He found himself noticing the way Penelope's face softened when she looked at her son, the quiet competence with which she handled the demands of new motherhood despite having no help or resources. He noticed the sound of her laugh when he said something amusing, the intelligence in her eyes when they discussed books or current events, the way she always thought of others, even when she had every reason to focus on her own needs. On the 5th day after Henry's birth, Penelope declared herself ready to travel. "I feel strong enough," she said, "and I do not want to impose on your kindness any longer than necessary." "You are not imposing," Harrison said, more sharply than he intended. He softened his tone. "But if you feel ready, we will leave tomorrow at first light. The weather should be cool enough for travel if we go early." That night, Harrison lay awake long after Penelope and Henry had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of his feelings. He cared about Penelope more than he should after such a short acquaintance. He admired her strength, her resilience, her refusal to give up even when most people would have surrendered to despair. He enjoyed her company, looked forward to their conversations, felt a sense of peace in her presence that he had not experienced in years. Was this what falling in love felt like? He had courted a girl once, back in San Antonio, but she had married a banker's son with better prospects. Harrison had been disappointed but not heartbroken, which suggested that what he had felt for her was not love, or at least not the deep kind that the poets wrote about. This feeling for Penelope was different, stronger, more consuming. It scared him even as it filled him with a strange exhilaration. But Penelope was still grieving, still recovering from betrayal and abandonment. She had a newborn son to care for and a whole life to rebuild. The last thing she needed was some cowboy making unwanted romantic advances. Harrison resolved to push his feelings aside, to be the friend and helper she needed, nothing more. If his heart protested the decision, well, hearts had been wrong before. They set out the next morning as planned, with Penelope riding Copper while Harrison walked alongside, carrying Henry in a makeshift sling fashioned from his spare shirt. The baby seemed content with the arrangement, sleeping peacefully against Harrison's chest as they made their slow way across the desert terrain. Penelope watched them together, something unreadable in her expression. "He likes you," she observed. He usually fusses when I hand him off, but he settled right down with you. Babies can sense when someone is nervous, Harrison said. Maybe he knows I am too terrified of dropping him to move around much. Penelope smiled. You are good with him. Natural. Have you thought about having children of your own someday? I would need a wife first, Harrison pointed out. And that requires staying in one place long enough to court someone properly, which I have not managed yet. You want to stay in one place? Penelope asked. Or do you like the traveling, the freedom of the circuit? Harrison considered the question. I used to like it, he said slowly. The freedom, the independence, not being tied down. But lately I have been thinking it might be nice to have a home again, a place that is mine. Roots. He glanced at her. What about you? What kind of life do you want to build in Brownsville? A quiet one, Penelope said. A safe one. I want Henry to grow up knowing he is loved and valued. I want to work hard and earn an honest living. I want to wake up each morning without fear. She paused. I want to feel like I belong somewhere again. They reached Brownsville 3 days later, riding into town on a Thursday afternoon when the streets were busy with commerce. Harrison led them directly to Mrs. Chen's boarding house, a neat 2-story building painted cheerful yellow with white trim. Mrs. Chen herself answered his knock, her weathered face breaking into a smile when she recognized him. Harrison Zimmer, I was wondering when you would pass through again. Her sharp eyes took in Penelope and the baby, and her expression shifted to one of concern. What has happened? Harrison made introductions and explained the situation in broad strokes, leaving out the most painful details of Penelope's abandonment. Mrs. Chen listened intently, her gaze moving between them with an assessing quality that made Harrison slightly uncomfortable. Of course you can stay here, dear, she told Penelope warmly. I have a room on the 2nd floor that should suit you and the baby nicely. The rate is reasonable, and I can be flexible about payment if you are short on funds initially. Many of my boarders have skills they can trade for rent. Can you sew? Yes, Penelope said eagerly. I am quite good with a needle. I can do mending, alterations, even dressmaking if you have fabric. Excellent. We will work something out. Mrs. Chen gestured for them to follow her inside. Come, let me show you the room. The room was small but clean, with a comfortable-looking bed, a dresser, and a window that overlooked the street. There was even a cradle in the corner, left behind by a previous tenant. Penelope's eyes filled with tears at the sight of it. This is perfect, she said. Thank you so much, Mrs. Chen. You are welcome, dear. Now, you look exhausted. Why do not you rest while Harrison and I have a chat downstairs? Harrison followed Mrs. Chen to the kitchen, where she poured them both coffee and fixed him with a penetrating stare. That woman has been through something terrible, she said without preamble. I can see it in her eyes. Are you going to tell me what really happened? Harrison saw no point in lying to Mrs. Chen. She had a reputation for being discreet and fiercely protective of the women in her care. He told her everything, from finding Penelope on the salt flats to delivering Henry in the way station. When he finished, Mrs. Chen's expression was grim. Those wagon train people should be horsewhipped, she said flatly. Leaving a pregnant woman to die because some man could not take rejection. It is unconscionable. She studied Harrison over the rim of her coffee cup. You have feelings for her. It was not a question, but Harrison felt his face heat anyway. I barely know her, Mrs. Chen. You delivered her baby and took care of her for over a week. I would say you know her pretty well. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. There is nothing wrong with caring for someone, Harrison. You are a good man. But that woman is fragile right now, even if she does not show it. She needs time to heal, to find her footing. Do not rush her. I am not going to pursue her, Harrison said. She has enough to deal with without me adding to her burdens. I just want to make sure she is settled and safe. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. Good, but do not disappear completely either. I think you are good for each other once enough time has passed." She stood and refilled his coffee. "Now, tell me what news you have from your route. Did the Martinez family receive the package I sent through you last month?" Harrison stayed in Brownsville for 3 more days, ostensibly to wrest copper and resupply before continuing his circuit. In reality, he wanted to make sure Penelope was truly settled before he left. He helped her arrange her few possessions in her room, introduced her to some of the town's merchants who might need sewing services, and played with Henry while she met with Mrs. Chen to work out the details of their arrangement. On his last evening in town, he knocked on Penelope's door to say goodbye. She opened it with Henry in her arms, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Harrison, I was hoping I would see you before you left. Come in." He stepped into the small room, suddenly feeling awkward. Over the past days, surrounded by the bustle of town and other people, the easy intimacy they had shared at the way station had faded into something more formal. He missed it. "I am heading out at first light," he said. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." "I do, thanks to you." Penelope shifted Henry to her other arm. "Mrs. Chen has been wonderful. I already have 3 sewing commissions lined up, and the general store owner said he might hire me to help with his accounts a few days a week once Henry is a bit older. I feel like things are finally starting to work out." "I am glad," Harrison said, and meant it. "You deserve good things, Penelope. You and Henry both." There was a long pause. Henry made a small sound and Penelope looked down at him, her hair falling forward to hide her expression. "When will you be back in Brownsville?" she asked quietly. "My circuit takes about 6 weeks normally." "So a month and a half, give or take. Will you come see us when you return? I would like Henry to know the man who helped bring him into the world." Harrison felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "I would like that too. I will come see you as soon as I get back to town." Penelope looked up at him then, and Harrison saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. A door left open rather than firmly closed. "Be safe on the road," she said. "And Harrison, thank you for everything." "I know I have said it before, but I do not think I can say it enough times." "You do not need to thank me," Harrison said. "I did not do anything special. You saved my life. You delivered my son. You treated me with respect and kindness when I had no reason to expect either from any man." Penelope's voice was fierce. "That is not nothing, Harrison Zimmer. Do not diminish what you did." Harrison did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. He reached out and gently touched Henry's head, marveling at the softness of the baby's dark hair. "Take care of your mother, little man. She is something special." Then he left before he could say or do something foolish, before he could admit that walking away from Penelope, and Henry felt like leaving a piece of himself behind. The next 6 weeks were the longest of Harrison's life. He rode his circuit with the same efficiency as always, delivering mail and packages, sharing news between isolated homesteads and towns. But his mind was always elsewhere, wondering how Penelope was managing, whether Henry was growing well, if she thought about him even a fraction as much as he thought about her. He found himself talking about them to the people on his route, which was unusual for him. Harrison had always been a private person, keeping his thoughts and feelings close. But now he found himself mentioning the baby he had helped deliver, the remarkable woman who had survived an ordeal that would have killed most people. The reactions varied from skepticism to admiration, but most people seemed touched by the story. Old Miguel Hernandez, who ran a ranch 30 miles north of Brownsville, listened to Harrison's account and then studied him with knowing eyes. "You are in love with this woman," he said in his heavily accented English. Harrison started to deny it, then stopped. What was the point? "I think I might be," he admitted, But it is complicated. She is barely widowed. She has a newborn child. She has been through trauma. I have no right to burden her with my feelings. Miguel snorted. Love is not a burden, my young friend. It is a gift. And from what you tell me, this woman could use some gifts in her life. He leaned forward. But you are right to wait. Let her heal. Let her find her strength again. Then, when the time is right, you tell her how you feel. Let her decide if she wants what you are offering. What if she does not? Harrison asked. What if she just sees me as the man who helped her once, nothing more? Then you will be sad for a while, but you will survive, Miguel said pragmatically. But what if she does feel the same? What if you could have something wonderful, but you throw it away because you are afraid? That is the real tragedy, no, not trying. Harrison carried those words with him for the rest of his circuit. Not trying. Was that what he was doing by staying silent? He had told himself he was being noble, giving Penelope space to heal, but maybe he was just being a coward. Maybe she deserved to know that someone valued her, cared for her, saw her as more than just a woman in need of rescue. By the time he rode back into Brownsville 6 weeks later, Harrison had made a decision. He would not rush Penelope or pressure her, but he would be honest about his feelings. He would tell her that he cared for her, that he wanted to know her better, and then he would let her choose. It terrified him, but it also felt right. He went to Mrs. Chen's boarding house straight from the stable where he had left Copper. His heart was pounding as he knocked on the front door, but it was not Mrs. Chen who answered. It was Penelope herself, and the sight of her stole Harrison's breath. She looked different than when he had left her. Healthier, more rested, more settled in herself. Her dark hair was pinned up neatly, and she wore a simple but well-made dress of green cotton that brought out the gray of her eyes. When she saw him, her whole face transformed with joy. "Harrison, you are back." She reached out and grasped his hands, pulling him inside. "I've been watching for you every day this past week. I was starting to worry something had happened." "I am fine, just the usual delays on the circuit," Harrison said, acutely aware of her hands in his. "How are you? How is Henry?" "We are wonderful. Come up and see him. He has grown so much in just 6 weeks." Penelope led him upstairs, chattering about Henry's development, the sewing commissions she had completed, the friends she was making in town. She seemed happy, genuinely happy, and Harrison felt his anxiety ease slightly. Henry was asleep in his cradle, one tiny fist pressed against his cheek. He had indeed grown, filling out from the scrawny newborn Harrison remembered into a proper baby with chubby cheeks and a crown of dark hair. "He is beautiful," Harrison said softly. "He looks like you. Do you think so?" "I see my father in him sometimes, around the eyes." Penelope stood beside Harrison, both of them gazing down at the sleeping infant. "He smiled for the first time last week. It was probably just gas, but I am choosing to believe it was real." They moved away from the cradle to avoid waking Henry, and Penelope gestured for Harrison to sit in one of the 2 chairs by the window. She took the other, arranging her skirts with an unconscious grace. "Tell me about your circuit. What news from the outside world?" Harrison told her about the ranches and homesteads he had visited, about the mail he had delivered and the gossip he had heard. As he talked, he found himself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of their conversations, the easy back and forth that had developed during their time at the way station. Penelope listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering observations that were often astute. "I have been doing some sewing for the sheriff's wife," she said when Harrison paused. "She is a terrible gossip, but she pays well and on time. She told me there was a dispute at one of the ranches north of here, something about cattle rustling." "Was that the Jensen place?" "It was," Harrison confirmed. "They lost about 20 head to rustlers last month. Sheriff Hackett is investigating, but so far no luck tracking them down." They talked until the sun began to set, and Henry woke demanding to be fed. Harrison stood to leave, but Penelope stopped him. "Would you like to stay for dinner? It is nothing fancy, just stew and cornbread, but there is plenty." Harrison knew he should decline, should maintain some distance, but he could not bring himself to refuse. "I would like that very much." They ate together in Penelope's small room, sharing the meal she had prepared on the boarding house's communal stove. Henry sat on Penelope's lap, grabbing at everything within reach with his chubby hands. When he lunged for Harrison's water glass, Harrison caught his hand gently and let the baby grip his finger instead. "He is strong," Harrison said, impressed by the force of that tiny grip. "He is determined," Penelope corrected with a smile. "He knows what he wants and he goes after it. I hope he keeps that quality as he grows." After dinner, Harrison helped Penelope clean up despite her protests that he was a guest. As they worked side by side in the small space, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed dishes, Harrison felt the words building in his chest. "Tell her," Miguel's voice urged in his memory. "Let her decide." "Penelope," he began, then stopped, suddenly unsure how to continue. She looked at him questioningly, a plate held in her hands. "Yes." Harrison took a deep breath and committed. "I need to tell you something. I have been thinking about it for weeks now, and I do not want to wait any longer." He saw alarm flash across her face and quickly added, "It is nothing bad." "At least, I hope you will not think it is bad." Penelope set down the plate and turned to face him fully. "What is it?" "I have feelings for you," Harrison said, the words coming out in a rush. "Romantic feelings. I think I started falling for you back at the way station, and being away from you these past 6 weeks only made it clearer. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I know you have been through a lot, and I know you need time, but I wanted to be honest with you. I wanted you to know that I care about you as more than just a friend." Penelope stared at him, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched until Harrison wanted to take back every word, to apologize and leave and never come back. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was imagining it. The way you looked at me sometimes, the gentleness in your voice. I told myself I was seeing things that were not there, that you were just being kind." "It was not just kindness," Harrison said. "I mean, I wanted to help you because it was the right thing to do. But somewhere along the way it became more than that. You became more than that." "I do not know what to say," Penelope said slowly. "I have feelings for you too, Harrison. How could I not? You saved my life. You delivered my son. You have been nothing but good and kind and decent to me. But I am scared." The last word came out trembling. "I am scared to trust my feelings. I am scared to let myself care about someone again after what happened with Thomas, after what the wagon train did. I am scared of being hurt." Harrison took a step closer, careful not to crowd her. "I would never hurt you, Penelope. Not intentionally. I know I cannot prove that with words, only with time and actions. But I am willing to wait. I am willing to go as slow as you need. I just wanted you to know that I am here and that I care about you, and that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like the chance to court you properly." Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You are a good man, Harrison Zimmer, better than I deserve." "No," Harrison said firmly. "You deserve everything good in this world, Penelope Vance. You deserve to be cherished and respected and loved. Never doubt that." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "Can we try? Slowly, like you said. I do not know if I am ready for this, but I do not want to lose the chance either. You make me feel safe, Harrison. You make me feel seen. I have not felt that way in a very long time." Joy flooded through Harrison, so intense it almost hurt. "We can go as slow as you need. There is no rush, no pressure. We will figure this out together." They stood there holding hands, smiling at each other like fools until Henry let out an indignant squawk from his cradle, demanding attention. The moment broke, and they both laughed, but the warmth remained, a promise of something new and precious growing between them. Over the following months, Harrison adjusted his circuit to spend more time in Brownsville. When he was in town, he and Penelope fell into the habit of sharing meals, taking walks along the Rio Grande with Henry bundled against the weather, talking about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Harrison was patient, never pushing for more than Penelope was ready to give, content to build a foundation of trust and friendship that could support something deeper. Penelope bloomed under his attention and the security of her new life. She took on more sewing work and eventually convinced the general store owner to let her manage his accounts 2 mornings a week. The extra income allowed her to save money, to plan for Henry's future, to feel independent in a way she never had during her marriage. Harrison loved watching her confidence grow, loved the way she laughed more freely as the months passed, loved how she started to trust him with the darker parts of her past without fear of judgment. He told her about his own struggles and insecurities, about the loneliness he had felt before meeting her, about his dreams of owning land again someday and building something lasting. "Where would you want this land to be?" Penelope asked one evening as they sat on the porch of the boarding house, watching the sun set over the Rio Grande. Henry was asleep in her arms, worn out from a day of exploration now that he was crawling. "I have been thinking about that," Harrison said. "There is some good grazing land about 15 miles north of here, along Resaca Creek. It is not too expensive, and it is close enough to town that we would not be isolated. I have been saving my wages, and I am almost ready to make an offer." Penelope looked at him with interest. "We." Harrison felt his face warm. "I was thinking ahead, maybe too far ahead, but yes, I was thinking that maybe someday, if things continue to go well between us, it could be a place for both of us. You and Henry too, if you wanted." "I would like that," Penelope said softly. "I would like a home of our own, a place where Henry could grow up with space to run and explore, a place where we could build a life together." She paused, then added with a shy smile, "A place where we could be a family." Harrison's heart stuttered. "Penelope, are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I am ready," Penelope said, meeting his eyes steadily. "Ready to stop being afraid, ready to trust what I feel for you, ready to build a future together." She reached out and took his hand. "I love you, Harrison. I think I have loved you for a while now, but I needed time to be sure to trust it, but I am sure now." Harrison felt like he might burst with happiness. "I love you too. God, Penelope, I have wanted to say those words for months. I love you and Henry both. You are my family, the one I thought I would never have." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, but she met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, a promise sealed between them. Henry stirred in Penelope's arms but did not wake, and when they pulled apart, both of them were grinning like children. "So," Harrison said, his voice slightly unsteady, "would you consider marrying me? I know we should wait a bit longer to be proper, but I want you to know that is where my intentions lie. I want to marry you, Penelope. I want to adopt Henry legally as my son. I want to build that house by Resaca Creek and fill it with love and laughter and maybe more children if you want them. I want everything with you." Penelope was crying now, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it, but you are right, we should wait a little longer. I do not want anyone to think poorly of you or of us. Let us wait until I have been widowed for a full year, and then we will marry." 6 months then, Harrison calculated. Thomas Vance had died in April of the previous year, and it was now October. "I can wait 6 months if I know you will be mine at the end of it." They were married in April of 1880, exactly 1 year after Thomas Vance's death, in a simple ceremony at the church in Brownsville with Mrs. Chen and several of Penelope's new friends as witnesses. Henry, now 8 months old and babbling constantly, was held by Mrs. Chen during the ceremony and seemed fascinated by the proceedings. Harrison had made an offer on the land by Resaca Creek and had it accepted. He spent his free time over the winter clearing brush and starting construction on a house, determined to have it ready for his new family by the time they married. It was not large, just 4 rooms with a covered porch, but it was solid and well built, and Harrison took pride in every nail he hammered. Penelope helped when she could, offering suggestions on the layout and sewing curtains and quilts to make the house feel like a home. On the day they moved in, a week after their wedding, she stood in the middle of the main room and slowly turned in a circle, taking it all in. "It is perfect," she said, her eyes shining. "Harrison, it is absolutely perfect." "It is ours," Harrison said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Our home, our fresh start." They settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Harrison took on less of the circuit work, hiring a younger rider to cover some of his longer routes so he could spend more time at home. He bought a small herd of cattle and started building up the ranch, working from dawn to dusk alongside the 2 ranch hands he had hired. Penelope managed the household and continued her sewing work, now taking on custom orders from wealthier families in Brownsville and the surrounding area. She had a talent for design, and her reputation grew. Money was sometimes tight, but they always had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. Henry thrived in the country setting, growing into a curious and active toddler who followed Harrison everywhere, mimicking his father's walk and trying to help with ranch tasks. Harrison legally adopted him on their first anniversary, and the judge who processed the paperwork remarked that he had rarely seen a child who looked more like his father, despite there being no blood relation. "Love makes a family," the judge said. "Blood is just one way to build it, not the only way." On a warm evening in June of 1881, Penelope told Harrison she was pregnant. They were sitting on the porch watching Henry chase fireflies in the gathering dusk when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "There is another one in here," she said quietly. "Our baby this time, yours and mine together." Harrison could not speak for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. "When?" he finally managed. "January, I think, maybe February." Penelope looked at him anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" "I know we said we would wait a few years, but these things do not always follow plans." "Happy?" Harrison pulled her into his arms, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Penelope, I am beyond happy. I am delirious. Another child, a brother or sister for Henry. It is more than I ever dared to hope for." Their daughter was born in February of 1882 on a cold night when the wind howled around the house. This time there was a doctor present, summoned from Brownsville, and the birth was much easier than Henry's had been. When the doctor placed the baby girl in Harrison's arms, he felt tears stream down his face. "She looks like you," he told Penelope, studying the tiny features. "She has your nose, your chin." "What should we name her?" Penelope asked, exhausted but radiant. They had discussed names for months but never settled on one definitively. Now, holding his daughter and thinking about everything he and Penelope had overcome to get to this moment, Harrison knew exactly what her name should be. "Hope," he said. "Let us call her Hope." Penelope smiled through her own tears. "Hope Zimmer. It is perfect." Life on the ranch continued to grow and evolve. The cattle herd expanded, and Harrison hired more hands to help manage it. Penelope's sewing business became successful enough that she hired 2 young women from town to help with the larger orders. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. Henry started school in Brownsville when he turned 6, riding in with Harrison twice a week when his father had business in town. He was bright and eager to learn, inheriting Penelope's love of books and numbers. Hope was quieter but equally curious, content to spend hours examining bugs in the garden or helping her mother with simple sewing tasks. In the summer of 1884, Miguel Hernandez rode up to the ranch unannounced, his weathered face creased with worry. Harrison was working on mending a fence when he saw the old rancher approaching and went to meet him. "Miguel, this is a surprise. What brings you all the way down here?" Miguel dismounted stiffly, his arthritis clearly bothering him. "I need to talk to you, Harrison, about my ranch." Over coffee in the kitchen, with Penelope listening intently, Miguel explained his situation. He was getting old, his joints ached constantly, and he had no children to leave his ranch to. "I want to retire, move to San Antonio where my sister lives," he said. "But I do not want to sell to just anyone. I want someone who will care for the land, treat the animals right, respect the workers I have employed for years." "You want us to buy your ranch?" Harrison asked, stunned. "I want you to have it," Miguel corrected. "I will sell it to you for a fair price, but much less than I could get on the open market. You are a good man, Harrison, and your wife is a good woman. You will do right by the place." He smiled. "Besides, you believed in love when you were too scared to admit it. I helped you with that, so you owe me." Harrison looked at Penelope, who was doing rapid calculations in her head. "We would have to sell this ranch to afford it," she said slowly. "But Miguel's land is 3 times the size, with better water access and established grazing patterns. It would be a good move for us, a way to expand and secure our future." "What about the house?" Harrison asked. "We built this place together." "And we will build another one together," Penelope said firmly, "on Miguel's land. This house was our first chapter, Harrison. Let us write the next one somewhere new." They bought Miguel's ranch and moved in the fall of 1884, after a bittersweet goodbye to the little house by Resaca Creek. The new ranch was indeed larger and more prosperous, with a bigger house that needed repairs but had good bones. Harrison threw himself into learning every aspect of the operation, while Penelope made friends with the ranch hands' wives and established her sewing business in the new location. Henry loved the bigger ranch, with more space to explore and more cattle to learn about. He had already decided he wanted to be a rancher like his father when he grew up. Hope, now 2.5, was delighted by all the new hiding places and promptly got lost 3 times in the first week, giving both her parents gray hairs. In 1886, Penelope gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named James and Grace. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos, and Harrison would not have had it any other way. He sometimes paused in his work to simply listen to the sounds of his family, the children laughing, Penelope singing as she worked, and felt his heart swell with gratitude. One evening, when the twins were about 6 months old, Harrison and Penelope sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sun set over the ranch. Henry was teaching Hope how to skip stones in the creek, and the twins were asleep inside, watched over by Rosa, one of the ranch hands' wives who helped with childcare. "You ever think about that day on the salt flats?" Penelope asked quietly. "About how different our lives could have been if you had not found me?" "I think about it often," Harrison admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding a different direction that day, to missing you entirely. It terrifies me." Penelope took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I think about it too, and I think about how you could have just given me water and directions and ridden on. You did not have to help me the way you did. You chose to, every step of the way." "I could not have done anything else," Harrison said. "From the moment I saw you out there, so determined to survive, I was drawn to you. And then I got to know you and I was lost. You were so strong, so brave, so fierce in your love for Henry even before he was born. How could I not fall in love with you?" "I was scared of you at first," Penelope confessed. "Not of you specifically, but of any man. Thomas had hurt me so deeply, and then the wagon train betrayed me, and I had no reason to trust that you were different. But you were patient with me. You let me set the pace. You showed me through your actions that not all men are cruel, that some are genuinely good." She turned to face him fully, her gray eyes serious in the fading light. "You gave me back my faith in love, Harrison. You gave me a family, a home, a future I never dared to dream of. You gave me everything." Harrison cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "You gave me just as much. Before you, I was drifting, just like you said. I had no purpose beyond the next mail delivery, the next paycheck. You gave me a reason to build something, to plan for tomorrow. You gave me love and family and belonging. We saved each other, Penelope." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. From the creek, they could hear Henry calling that it was getting dark and they should come inside. Hope's high voice chimed in, demanding stories before bed. Their life was full and busy and sometimes exhausting, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of trust and love that had started on a salt flat in the middle of nowhere. The years rolled on, bringing both challenges and joys. There were droughts that tested their resources, illnesses that scared them, and the usual struggles of raising 4 children and running a large ranch. But through it all, Harrison and Penelope faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. Henry grew into a responsible young man who took on more and more ranch duties, eventually becoming Harrison's right hand in managing the operation. Hope developed her mother's talent for design and her father's head for business, helping Penelope expand the sewing enterprise into a full dressmaking shop in Brownsville. The twins, James and Grace, were inseparable and constantly getting into mischief, but they had good hearts and helped around the ranch without complaint. In 1895, when Henry was 16, he came to Harrison with a request. "There is a girl," he said, his ears turning red. "Sarah Martinez, Miguel's great-niece. She has been visiting her family in San Antonio, but she is moving back to Brownsville next month. I would like permission to court her properly." Harrison felt a surge of emotion, seeing his son grown and thinking about romance. "Does she know how you feel?" "We have been writing letters," Henry admitted. "She seems interested, but I want to do things right. I want to ask her father's permission, and I need to know I have your blessing too." "You have it," Harrison said, clasping his son's shoulder. "But Henry, remember to be patient. Let her set the pace, respect her wishes and her boundaries, and always, always treat her like she is precious, because if she agrees to be with you, she will be." Henry nodded seriously. "Like you treat mother, exactly like that." Harrison and Penelope watched with pride as Henry courted Sarah with old-fashioned respect and genuine affection. The courtship lasted 2 years, and they married in 1897 when Henry was 18 and Sarah was 17. It was a big wedding, the social event of the season in Brownsville, and Harrison could not help but think back to his own simple ceremony 17 years earlier. "Our family is growing," Penelope said as they watched Henry and Sarah dance at the reception. She was 40 now, her dark hair threaded with silver, but to Harrison she was as beautiful as the day he had found her on the salt flats. "It is a good thing we have a big ranch," Harrison replied, pulling her close. "Room for everyone." Hope married in 1900 at age 18 to a young lawyer from Brownsville, a serious but kind man who adored her. The twins showed no signs of settling down yet, but they were only 14 and more interested in horses and cattle than romance. Harrison was fine with that. They had plenty of time. In 1902, Harrison and Penelope celebrated their 22nd anniversary by taking a trip, just the two of them, to San Antonio. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since before the children were born, and it felt like a second honeymoon. They visited museums and restaurants, attended a concert, and spent hours just walking and talking, reconnecting without the constant demands of ranch life and family. On their last night in the city, they sat in their hotel room looking out over the lights of San Antonio. "Do you have any regrets?" Harrison asked. "Anything you wish had been different?" Penelope considered the question seriously. "I regret Thomas," she said finally. "Not marrying him, because if I had not, I would never have been on that wagon train, would never have been left in the desert, would never have met you. But I regret the years I wasted trying to make that marriage work, trying to change myself to please someone who was incapable of being pleased. I wish I had been braver sooner." "You were brave enough when it mattered," Harrison said. "You walked across a desert pregnant and alone rather than compromise yourself. That takes more courage than most people have in a lifetime." "What about you?" Penelope asked. "Any regrets?" Harrison thought about his life, about the choices he had made. "I regret not telling you I loved you sooner," he said. "I wasted weeks being noble and patient when I could have been honest, but that is a small thing, really. Everything important worked out the way it was supposed to." They returned to the ranch refreshed and reconnected, ready to face whatever the future held, and the future held plenty. Henry and Sarah had 2 children, giving Harrison and Penelope grandchildren to dote on. Hope and her husband settled in Brownsville, where she opened her own dress shop that became the most fashionable in the region. The twins eventually split their interests, with James taking over the day-to-day running of the ranch while Grace married a veterinarian and helped him establish a practice that served all the ranchers in the area. In 1910, Harrison turned 55 and decided it was time to step back from the hardest physical labor, leaving the heavy ranch work to James and the hands. He took on more of an advisory role, consulting on decisions but letting the next generation lead. Penelope, at 51, finally retired from active sewing and dressmaking, content to garden and help with the grandchildren, and enjoy the fruits of their decades of hard work. They spent more time together than they had in years, often sitting on the porch in the evening watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. They had been married for 30 years, together for 31, and the love between them had only deepened with time. One evening in the spring of 1911, as they sat watching the sky turn pink and gold, Penelope said, "Tell me the story again." Harrison knew which story she meant. "Which part?" "The beginning, when you first saw me." Harrison smiled and began the familiar tale. "You were just a speck at first, shimmering in the heat. I thought you were a mirage, but something made me ride closer anyway. And then I saw you, this woman walking alone across the salt flats, pregnant and determined and too stubborn to give up even when most people would have laid down and died." "I was terrified," Penelope interjected. "You were magnificent," Harrison corrected. "You still are. What did you think when you first saw me up close?" "I thought you had the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen, like rain clouds in a drought. And I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met. And I thought I wanted to know your story, to understand how you ended up there and where you were going." He took her hand. "I had no idea that your story would become my story, that your journey would become my home." Penelope leaned her head on his shoulder. I was so afraid to love you. After everything that had happened, I had convinced myself that love was just another word for pain. But you showed me different. You showed me that love could be gentle and patient and kind. You showed me that love was not about control or possession, but about partnership and respect and choosing each other every day. We did get lucky, though, Harrison said. Finding each other in the middle of nowhere, in circumstances that should have led to nothing but tragedy. What were the chances? Maybe it was not luck, Penelope mused. Maybe it was meant to be. Maybe every terrible thing that happened to both of us was leading us to that exact moment, to that exact place, so we could find each other and build this life together. Harrison considered that. He had never been particularly religious or superstitious, but there was something appealing about the idea that their meeting had been fated, that all the pain and loss they had both experienced had a purpose. "I like that thought," he said. "I like the idea that we were always meant to find each other." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over them on that first night at the way station when they were still strangers learning to trust each other. So much had changed since then, but the fundamental core of who they were to each other remained the same. Partners, lovers, best friends, family. "You remember what you said to me the night Henry was born?" Penelope asked softly. After everything was over and we were both just sitting there exhausted and amazed that we had survived, Harrison searched his memory. "I said a lot of things that night. You said you did all the hard work, and I told you that you did everything. Do you remember what you said next?" Harrison did remember, suddenly and clearly. "I said I did not do much, and I said you did everything. You gave me hope when I had none left." Penelope lifted her head to look at him. "That is still true, Harrison. After all these years, you still give me hope. Hope for tomorrow, hope for our children and grandchildren, hope that goodness exists in the world even when things seem dark." "You named our daughter well then," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. "I did," Penelope agreed. "Though I named her for what you gave me, not just for the abstract concept. You are my hope, Harrison Zimmer. You always have been." They kissed as they had thousands of times before, but it felt as sweet and meaningful as their first kiss on the porch of Mrs. Chen's boarding house all those years ago. Some loves fade with time, Harrison thought, but theirs had only grown stronger, roots digging deeper, branches spreading wider, sheltering everyone who came within their reach. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. They lost friends to age and illness, celebrated births and marriages, watched their grandchildren grow and begin families of their own. Through it all, Harrison and Penelope remained each other's constant, the fixed point around which everything else revolved. In 1920, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a huge party that brought together 4 generations of family. Henry was 41 now with 3 children of his own, the oldest of whom was already married. Hope had 2 daughters who were the pride of Brownsville society. The twins were 34, both married with children, still inseparable despite living in different houses on the ranch property. As Harrison looked around at the gathered family, at the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who existed, because he had ridden across a salt flat, one October day in 1879, he felt overwhelmed by gratitude. One decision, one choice to investigate a distant figure instead of riding on, had led to all of this. An entire family tree that would never have existed otherwise. Penelope found him during the party, slipping her hand into his. She was 61 now, her hair completely silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. To Harrison, she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything," Harrison said. Our whole life together, how it all started. How lucky I am. How lucky we both are, Penelope corrected. She gestured to the crowd of family members. Look what we built, Harrison. Look at what came from two broken people who found each other in the desert. We were not that broken, Harrison protested. Yes, we were, Penelope said firmly. You were adrift and lonely. I was running from an abusive marriage and had just been betrayed by people I trusted. We were both damaged, both lost. But we found each other and we healed together. That is what makes our story so beautiful. Not that we were perfect, but that we were broken and made each other whole. Harrison pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. I love you, he said. I have loved you for 41 years, and I will love you until I take my last breath. And I love you, Penelope whispered back. My rescuer, my partner, my home. Thank you for finding me, Harrison. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me, Harrison replied. Thank you for trusting me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. You are everything, Penelope. Everything. They stood together in the middle of the celebration, surrounded by the family they had created. And Harrison thought about that young cowboy riding across the salt flats, about the pregnant woman walking alone through the desert, about how two lives that should never have intersected became so completely intertwined that it was impossible to imagine them apart. Love, Harrison had learned, was not just a feeling. It was a choice made every day, a commitment renewed with every sunrise, a partnership forged through shared joys and weathered sorrows. It was patient when patience was needed, fierce when protection was required, gentle when tenderness was called for. It was work and reward, sacrifice and fulfillment, challenge and comfort, all wrapped into one incredible, messy, beautiful experience. And he would not trade a single moment of it, not the hard parts or the scary parts or the parts that had tested them to their limits. Because all of it, every single bit, had been worth it to have this life with Penelope, to wake up beside her every morning and fall asleep with her every night, to know that he was loved and valued and chosen by the most remarkable woman he had ever met. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Texas sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, Harrison and Penelope sat together on the porch of the ranch house and watched their family enjoy the evening. Children ran through the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Adults talked and joked, sharing stories and making memories. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. You think we will have many more years? Penelope asked quietly, a question they had both been thinking about more as they aged. I hope so, Harrison said honestly. But however many we have, I will cherish every day. And when our time is done, I will go knowing that I lived a full life, that I loved deeply and was loved in return, that I made a difference in the world by being in yours. That is all any of us can hope for, Penelope agreed. She rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture as familiar and comfortable as breathing. Whatever happens, we face it together. That has always been our strength. Together. Together, Harrison echoed and sealed the promise with a kiss. They did have many more years, as it turned out. Harrison lived to be 78, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1933 with Penelope at his side. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped, whispering words of love and gratitude until the very end. And then she sat with him for a long time, remembering their life together, all the moments that had brought them from that salt flat to this bedroom, from strangers to soulmates. Penelope lived 4 more years without Harrison, years filled with family and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told the story of how she and Harrison met to anyone who would listen, wanting to make sure future generations knew where they came from, knew the love that had founded their family. She made it clear that their story was not just a romance, but a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of second chances, and the transformative nature of love. When Penelope died in 1937 at the age of 78, her family buried her next to Harrison on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple but meaningful. Harrison's read, "Beloved husband, father, and grandfather." He saw someone in need and stopped to help. Penelope's read, "Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she never gave up hope." Between the headstones, their children planted a tree, a strong oak that would grow and spread and provide shade for generations to come, just as Harrison and Penelope's love had sheltered and nurtured their family. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Texas landscape and the wind whispered through the branches, some of the grandchildren swore they could feel their presence there, together still, watching over the family they had created. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of James and his children. Hope's dress shop became a legacy in Brownsville, passed down to her daughters and granddaughters. Grace's veterinary practice grew into the largest in the region. And all of them, every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who came after, knew the story of the Salt Flat, the story of the cowboy who found a pregnant woman walking alone and chose to help, the story of how love can bloom even in the most unlikely and desperate of circumstances. Because in the end, that was what Harrison and Penelope's story was really about. Not just romance, though there was plenty of that. Not just survival, though they had certainly fought for it. But about the fundamental human capacity for compassion, for connection, for choosing to care about another person even when it would be easier not to. About seeing someone in need and deciding to help, no matter the cost or inconvenience. About building something beautiful and lasting from the ruins of broken pasts. Their love story began on a salt flat in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert in October of 1879, when a cowboy named Harrison Zimmer spotted a figure on the horizon and made the choice to ride closer. It continued through births and deaths, through droughts and prosperity, through challenges and triumphs, for nearly 60 years. And even after death, it lived on in the family they created, in the values they instilled, in the example they set of what love could be when it was based on mutual respect, genuine caring, and unwavering commitment. The children and grandchildren who gathered at the ranch for holidays and celebrations never tired of hearing the story, of imagining that desperate walk across the desert, that miraculous meeting, that slow burning courtship that turned into a lifetime of devotion. They told it to their own children, who told it to theirs, passing down the legacy of Harrison and Penelope Zimmer, the cowboy and the woman he rescued who became so much more than that to each other. And somewhere, perhaps, in whatever comes after this life, Harrison and Penelope were together still, watching over their family with pride and love, grateful for every moment they had been given, for the chance encounter that changed both their lives forever. A cowboy and a pregnant woman who met in the most unlikely of places and built something extraordinary together, proving that sometimes the best love stories begin with a simple act of kindness, a choice to help, and the courage to hope that tomorrow might be better than today. Their story ended where all good love stories should end, not with a dramatic climax or a cliffhanger, but with a life well lived, a family well loved, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that they had found in each other exactly what they needed. A partner, a friend, a love that lasted beyond the boundaries of life itself. And that, in the end, was everything.